Hello and welcome to the Frame Perfect podcast. My name is James Davies and I'm joined today by Josh Timmiss.
Hello.
And we thought that we'd do a very special edition version of the podcast focused on Pokemon due to the news Pokémon Sun and Moon announcements last week. So, both me and Josh are big Pokemon fans.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Mm-hmm. And we're both pretty excited by the idea of new games.
Definitely. I'm really excited for this new generation that's coming out.
Generation 7, as it'll be.
It's come a long way since the first generation.
Yeah,
I remember getting that game and playing through it. Now it's 7 generations on. It's been a while.
I've played every one of them.
Wow, you have.
So we don't know an awful lot about what Sun and Moon is actually going to involve at all. They showed an extremely quick "this is the announcement" trailer.
Yeah, they've been very tight-lipped on it, to say the least.
I'm sure there'll be some more details coming out in the coming months, but for now, we're going to have a run over what we'd like from the new Pokemon, and hopefully some of these things will come to pass.
Hopefully so, anyway. If we were building a Pokemon game, this is what Pokemon Sun and Moon would be like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, running through the list, why don't we take it sort of point by point?
Yeah.
Alright, so my first point is more Mega Evolutions.
More Mega Evolutions.
Which I think is going to be probably a pretty certain bet.
I think it'll be a given.
I think that the introduction of Mega Evolutions are actually really awesome with X and Y. I didn't think that I was going to like them very much, but I actually think they're really cool.
Yeah. I thought it would be a strange little gimmick that they'd throw in, but it's added a lot to the game, actually, and you get to use Pokemon you wouldn't necessarily use previously. So I really like the aspect of utilising Pokemon that won't be that
totally.
aren't normally used.
And it means that you get to see a cool new design for a Pokemon that might have been around for 10, 20 years. You get to see a new version of it, which is really refreshing.
Yeah, it is. It's like the fan arts of different what their version of the Pokemon would look like, and it is that, and it's really fun to see.
It's suddenly canon, and then it can add a new type or a new ability, and it makes the Pokemon an entirely different, usable thing.
It's definitely a lot of fun to play around with.
Yeah,
just experimenting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Suddenly with Mega Charizard Y, I'll teach it Solar Beam.
Yeah,
use it one turn because it's got Sunny Day.
It's so strange, but it works perfectly fine. And I love Mega Evolutions, and I think that there'll be some interesting ones in Sun and Moon.
Yeah, definitely be some. Hopefully there'll be some new ones as well, because with Gen 6 they were really focused on not giving any of the actual new Pokemon Mega Evolutions. The only Pokemon that got them were the ones from previous gens.
Yes, that's true, actually.
So it'd be interesting to see if we got some new Pokemon that came with a Mega Evolution.
That would be interesting. I don't think that'll be the case.
No, okay. Right.
I think they'll just leave them as their own Pokemon.
Fair enough.
And kind of give them an identity to begin with. Because, I don't think I'd appreciate Charizard as much if it just became Mega Charizard X or Y.
Yeah, fair enough.
And, Pokemon like that, I wouldn't appreciate these Pokemon as much if there were just another better step that was just there immediately.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, do you see what I mean?
With that line of thinking, do you reckon that now that we've had the Gen 6 ones around for a couple of years and they've sort of built their own identity, that they might add Mega Evolutions to some of those Pokemon?
It's very possible. It could be something for future games, just to add to Pokemon's longevity. And that seems to be the trend at the minute of going through the generations. So I think they'll try and stay away from 6th gen for a while. I wouldn't expect to see Mega Trevenant or anything like that anytime soon, but definitely down the future.
I think we'll probably eventually at least end up with Mega versions of the starters, at least.
Oh,
I imagine that they'll cover at least the starters from every gen in a Mega form.
Well, there are rumours of Mega Greninja.
Really?
There are. I believe it was in Korokoro magazine, and they showed off a different version of Greninja that was in the anime, or going into the anime, and it was labelled as Ash's Greninja. So I don't know if that's just a redesign of the original Greninja or what people are suspecting, which is Mega Greninja.
Yeah, it could be. And I did have a chance to look over that actually. And if you look at the images, it does sort of seem to share some elements of Ash's design as well.
Yeah.
So it could just be some weird anime thing, but it could be a new design for a Pokemon.
Definitely could be.
Alright, so what would you like to see?
I'd definitely like to see more different type variants. We've definitely in the last generation we got some pretty experimental variations, especially with the inclusion of fairy typing. And we've got to see some really cool typing, like we mentioned Trevenant earlier, of course, grass, and that was really interesting. And there was the event Pokemon, I forgot what it was called, the volcano one, but it was water and fire, which is a typing.
Is that Volcanion?
I believe so, yeah. And that was a typing I never thought would
I still don't think that's released, actually.
I don't think it is.
No, it hasn't released yet. So.
But it was a water-fire type.
Water-fire, yeah.
And which is such a strange type.
That is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and I think, well, every combination hasn't been explored yet. So it's something I'd definitely love to see, is them experimenting with some of these typings and having some interesting matchups.
Do you have any idea of a particular, like, type combination that you'd really like?
There are some types that I don't think have been fully explored yet. With fairy type being included in the last generation, it opened poison and steel typings up a lot more and made them so much more relevant. So some interesting types with steel types and dark types maybe would be interesting. Maybe like a dark dragon type or something like that would be really cool to play around with, or maybe a poison fairy type. I'm just throwing off the top of my head currently, but it would definitely throw out some interesting combinations, interesting matchups as well for online competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. It would change up the whole way that works, I imagine. If you throw in something new, then it could be a whole key to the game.
Definitely. What else would you like to see?
So I really always like, this is sort of similar to Mega Evolutions, but further evolutions for previous chains of Pokemon. They did this a lot in Gen 4, where they'd go back to a lot of the original Pokemon and just give them like a further evolution or a baby evolution.
Yeah.
And I actually quite like that stuff. So I'd like to see maybe like an extra form for like Sandslash, Rapidash, Ninetales,
some of the earlier
a lot of the
stuff.
earlier stuff, seems to sort of spring out to me as needing, if not a Mega, then maybe an official evolution.
Because a lot of those Pokemon have kind of petered out, it seems, with the inclusion of more typings and more abilities, and them keep adding stuff. Though the original first generation Pokemon have kind of faded into the background almost.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to see them add to those Pokemon and like give them a new dimension and give them a reason to revisit these Pokemon.
Yeah, make them a lot more relevant nowadays, definitely.
And that could definitely be something with an inclusion in the 20th anniversary release of
that would make a lot of
Pokemon
sense.
Yellow, and because they said you can transfer those Pokemon over. So it'll be interesting to see if you can transfer them over and make them evolve
do
even
something
more.
else with them, that would be particularly brilliant if they could inform some kind of way that the particular Pokemon from Yellow, now that you can transfer them over, could deliberately do something different. And it's only if you get a Gen 1 Pokemon from Yellow or like Gen 1 from Kanto, maybe.
Yeah, it would definitely be interesting.
That would be really interesting. Alright, what's your next point?
Another thing that Pokemon Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby did really well was the post-game content that they had, which was huge. I've not seen anything that big for like a while, because a lot of it is just a new game plus mode or something along those lines. But, you know, you beat the game in Omega Ruby or Alpha Sapphire and there's a whole new mission and adventure to go on. And I really love that, and I would love to see something like that implemented again.
Yeah, that entire section called the Delta episode after you beat the main game is an incredible bit of content that they didn't need to put on there. And like, it's not every Pokemon game has had a good post-game or a lengthy post-game. But it's something they've done really nicely with the remakes in general, it seems. Like, I know that Leaf Green had a really good post-game because they added like new islands and areas. Heart Gold and Soul Silver had so many legendaries for you to go out and catch.
I think they could have easily left it out as well and just had a simple remake of the game, just remastered, and include the nice little details like flying around on Latios or Latios and stuff like that. I thought that would be the extent of it maybe, but the post-game content is top-notch, and I would love to see something like that again. Yeah, the storyline in it is actually the best that the story's ever been in Pokemon. Which is saying something. It is, Pokemon. Yeah, and it's just a nice, concise, like 4 or 5 hour post-credits, little bit of gameplay. So why not have a great post-game in Sun and Moon? It would make sense. It would make perfect sense to implement that in, especially if they have a good story to go off, not just the traditional, you want to be a champion, you're fighting all the gyms, and there's an evil criminal organisation called Team moon destruction or something
Probably,
like that.
yeah.
Team Sun destruction. They want to destroy the moon, or they'll probably do something with eclipses.
Yeah, probably actually. Yeah,
just like that Simpsons episode.
I am unaware of this.
It's for another time. This podcast is about Pokemon, not the Simpsons. So what else would you like to see in the new Pokemon game?
I would particularly like to see loads of Pokemon. Maybe an additional 100 or so new Pokemon added, because whilst we're at 721, I think
it's a pretty large number.
Yeah, that seems like quite a lot. But like, why not add another 100 or so more per gen? I really don't mind.
It's a complaint that a lot of people have, that there are too many Pokemon now. But it seems kind of ridiculous, really, because it's not like people are saying there's too many fish in the world, there's too many different types of fish. What's with all these fish? We need to get we don't need so many fish, or we don't need so many birds. So let's get rid of a few. It's the world. The Pokemon are the animals of that world. So why not have this giant ecosystem and have some variants that are closer, resemble to each other, and like you can see the descendants of certain Pokemon, or
it doesn't need to be that every Pokemon is its own like completely unique animal. It doesn't need to be that there is one bird Pokemon and one scorpion Pokemon and so on. Like you can have 6 different types of fish Pokemon, because there are so many different types of fish that you can base it on different things. Exactly.
They've done that with the bird Pokemon that you encounter normally in the first areas. They have so many, and like one for pretty much every generation.
That's true, yeah.
With Pidgey and Swellow.
Yeah,
Starly, Fletchling.
Yeah, of course.
Was the most recent one. Why not just have a lot of birds and a lot of different types of spider? There's only 2 spider-type Pokemon, I believe.
Really?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
So, why not have some more, spiders?
You actually mentioned a really interesting point there with the bird Pokemon, because as they do have, a bird Pokemon every gen, seemingly, this is one of your starting area Pokemon.
Yeah.
With Fletching, and then, what is it? Fletchinder and then Talonflame, I think?
It's Fletchling, then, I believe it is, yeah.
Anyway, that's interesting as well, because then you've got suddenly a fire type right from the start of the game, whereas you'd expect it to just be normal.
A fire and flying type, which has never been seen.
Exactly.
Well, you have Charizard, Moltres.
Yeah.
Fire flying types. That's around it.
To get it right from the start of the game. Hopefully with Sun and Moon they could also throw in something really interesting from the start that you can catch and train up, and it'll be a really good member of your team, rather than just a simple normal type that you kick out after the first 3 gyms.
Kind of
get better
shows the evolution of birds as well, that there can be a fire bird and there'll be an electric bird or an ice bird or a ice psychic bird. I don't know.
Psychic bird, why not?
Yeah, why not?
I'd really like a psychic flying Pokemon.
Are there any of those?
I don't know.
I don't believe that it has.
See, which is crazy when you can say there's 721 Pokemon, and you go, oh well, has this type matchup happened? No. Oh.
No. Well, there's definitely room for it. So it's something I'd definitely like to see.
Make it happen, Game Freak.
Something else I'd like to see, going along with how many Pokemon there are, and it's gotten to a huge number, and I think Pokemon of Nintendo Game Freak have definitely missed something with this. And their whole kind of slogan, their marketing has been based on the phrase "catch 'em all." It's part of Ash Ketchum's name. His name's Ash Ketchum. His name Catch 'em all. Their whole thing is built on catching them all and trading with friends. But when you catch them all, what do you get?
There's been very little reward for basically the entire time Pokemon's been around for you to get all the Pokemon.
I mean, getting 150 was hard enough, and it's okay, you caught them all. What's your reward? You've caught them all.
Yeah, that's it. You get a well done from Professor Oak, and
and I would love to see some kind of reward for catching them all. It would definitely be something like, okay, you've caught them all. Here's an item or a new Pokemon that you can only get once or an event that happens only when you've caught them all.
Something more tangible than the current form of reward. In Black and White 2, they introduced a thing called the Shiny Charm, where your shiny rate would increase by I think 50%. Oh no, I suppose it increases by 100%, which means that wild encounters have double the chance. which means that it just turns from like 1 in 8,000 to 1 in 4,000, and then therefore in Gen 6, 1 in 4,000 to 1 in 2,000. It's basically like not that great a reward unless you're like so into the game that like that's really going to mean something to you, because once you've collected everything there, unless you're into the side of like, well, I'm going to collect them again with an alternate colour scheme, then there's nothing more to offer. If the game had some form of extra content, just something else that you could do beyond catching every Pokemon, then that would make it really worthwhile.
Definitely. It feels... I was thinking about this the other day when we were writing notes for this, and I thought of like, it's kind of like getting a quest in something like just like any sandbox game. Let's go with Witcher.
Oh yeah, fair enough.
So imagine you're playing The Witcher and you get a quest to go collect X amount of items. Like, I know what's an item in Witcher.
I don't know, say 4 like succubus horns.
Okay, so your quest is to get 4 horns, and you come back to the guy, and you say, "I've got my 4 horns." And he's like, "Okay, your reward is those 4 horns."
Your reward is well done. You now have the horns that you went and got.
And that's kind of what it feels like.
That's totally it.
You're not getting rewarded for doing what they want you to do, which is collect them all.
Yeah, along the way you kind of like forge your own story in terms of like, oh well, I've beaten these gyms, like I've beaten the Elite Four. It's like you forget that the entire original concept was fill up the Pokedex and like catch them all and catalog them.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of the charm of Pokemon, is that you write your own story. I mean, in the Twitch Plays Pokemon, that whole stream was they made up an entire lore and story, and it became really engaging.
Yeah, that's true.
But the fact that the story has gone, like, you have to make your own story and not follow the story of trying to catch all the species of Pokemon is just... it's not engaging, really, and I would love to have something that would make me want to do it. But as of right now, I don't want to collect them all. I want to catch the Pokemon that I like and train some of them up and use them. I don't want to catch I don't want to catch a Caterpie because I probably won't use it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And you certainly don't want to catch like a Caterpie and then catch a Metapod and then catch a Butterfree. Like, yeah, so there certainly isn't the motivation there at the moment. So hopefully that'll be something that they change.
A lot of work for not a lot of a reward.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's hundreds of hours of play and you get almost nothing for it.
It's a strange one.
All right. What do you think of a new type being introduced with Gen 7?
A new type? I mean, it took another 4 generations to add a new type, which was Fairy type.
So let's break that down for a second. So in Gen 1, we have all of the original typings.
We have
minus Dark and Steel.
Yes.
So then Gen 2, they add in Dark and Steel, and then for 3 and 4 and 5, that's fine. That's all there is. And then suddenly with Gen 6, they announced Fairy type.
Fairy typing, yes.
And that sounded
really
lame.
When I heard the announcement for it, there was rumours that it was going to be a light type to go with like against Dark type and have an opposite to that. But when they came out with Fairy, it was a bit kind of like, okay, I guess I'll have a Fairy in my team now, along my team of fearful dragons,
and like fire monsters
and like human created psychic like super weapons.
Yeah.
And now, okay, I'm gonna have a Fairy in my team. Okay, right. So it was strange at first, but the typing is actually, it adds so much to the game. It really, like, I underestimate how much it would add to the game, but it's added so much.
Yeah, I actually really quite like Fairy type. My favourite type was Dragon, and of course, like, Dragon just doesn't affect Fairy at all.
Yeah,
like, literally doesn't do anything. So suddenly, my favourite type had this crazy like contender that was called Fairy type with this nice little pink logo, and suddenly I'm like, oh, actually, these guys are pretty powerful. They're pretty cool. What can they do?
Dragon type didn't have many weaknesses. It had Ice was a weakness, and Dragon itself.
And Dragon itself, yeah.
But now with Fairy type, it's got this huge weakness, and now Steel type and Poison type, which never really had a place in the game has a huge part of the game. Is a huge part of the game now because it's super effective against Fairy, and you get to use Pokemon like, I know, maybe a Steelix or a Viper. I'm not sure, but Pokemon like that you would never use because they have no benefit really to using them, now just have this crazy use that they never had before because of all these Fairy types and how powerful they actually are.
So clearly, like, Fairy type is actually a really good inclusion to the game.
It absolutely is.
So with that thinking in mind, could a new type be a good addition?
I think you've got to look at it two ways. Is one necessary right now? Like, can you see a typing which is really overpowered that needs to be neutered slightly? And what would the type be? Because, like, as of right now, it's like kind of hard to think of a typing that would that you could fit into the Pokemon world, unless the new generation is just all of this type of Pokemon that they've created.
Oh yeah, fair enough. I mean, like, I guess it would have been hard to predict that Fairy would be the next time, this time 3 years ago. So maybe if they do come up with something new, it would be something entirely different that we wouldn't be able to think of. Something like light type seems to make a lot of sense, just because there already is a dark type, and you'd think that it would be a natural counter to that.
But is that too similar to
Fairy? Exactly, I think it is.
You're running into the territory of things being too similar to one another, and thinking, well, I've got this type, I've been using it for years, I might as well stick with it because it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, you wouldn't want things to be too similar to one another, and you don't want to make a type just for the sake of it. You really want it to only be in case it's going to make other things relevant and it's going to revitalise the game like Fairy did.
Yes, definitely. So in terms of a new typing, I don't think one is necessary, and I don't think we need one. I think we're good with the types we have, unless a Pokemon type combination is so powerful that it needs a new typing. Then I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, I agree, and I hope that whatever new mechanics they do introduce, that they can keep everything balanced within the type frame that already exists. What else would you like to see in Sun and Moon?
I've got a couple of things down. One was playing off Mega Evolutions, like you mentioned before. I'm going to say necessary Mega Evolutions.
Okay.
Because Pokemon need to be careful with Mega Evolutions. They need to, I feel like they could just be handing out Mega Evolutions just because, we've had some before. We need to give out some more. We need to make everyone have a Mega Evolution, when that's really not the case. The best part of Mega Evolutions, which we talked about, is that it gets you to play with Pokemon that you never would have before. Like, no one used a Kangaskhan before, but because of its ability and everything, it was so used in the competitive scene, and it also added to other other Pokemon, like Mega Gyarados did. It added to it and made that Pokemon so much more developed and awesome. But I'd like to see that with more Pokemon, like, what's Arbok going on? Like, he's not got a lot going on right now, and I think a Mega Evolution could benefit Arbok a lot, especially with its typing being poison. It would definitely be very viable against Fairy types on the competitive scene.
Yeah, like a Mega Poison would be pretty cool, definitely.
So I think just like being careful with your choices for Mega Evolutions, and not just saying this one's cool, this one should get a Mega Evolution, or just anything like that. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. You got anything else on your list?
Just have a good story.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think Pokemon has gone into a bit of a. It's just a staple now. It's like it has to have this story. It's a lot like Mario in a way. But I'd like to see them try and do something interesting with the story. Maybe give me because I know through X and Y, I found a lot of the time I would just skip through all the dialogue,
right?
Because I wanted to keep fighting people or get to that gym or But if you give me a reason to read the tech boxes, then I'll absolutely engross the story more.
I feel that X and Y sort of tried that a little bit, but they added this whole element of like a Pokemon war that had happened like 1,000 years ago or something, and it added all of this like weird lore to the Pokemon world that I didn't need to be there, I guess. And it sort of just felt a little incongruous to everything that I'd already known about Pokemon. Like, it didn't feel like it was in the same world as the anime, which of course when you like grow up like watching that, that's your whole experience of Pokemon is that in the games. You think they're all one simultaneous world. So when the games deliberately do something to sort of break away from that canon, it just seems like a real shame to me, actually. And so hopefully they could introduce something that's still an interesting storyline without adding these like weird questions of like, okay, so how were there Pokemon around 1,000 years ago? If you've already said these things about them, and how did you control them if you didn't have Pokeballs, etc. It comes up with all these weird questions that I didn't give me any of the answers to, and that was kind of frustrating. So hopefully whatever they do with the story would be a bit more focused, or at least answerable.
I think they really need to sit down and craft out a story that adds to the Pokemon universe, rather than something that's just like, this is a thing because we said so.
Yeah.
Like the Pokemon War, which was a cool concept, actually. I really liked that concept of there being more to this universe, and like, you know, there were bad times, and that's why all these criminal organizations are sticking around, and they're the aftermath of this. And I would have liked to seen some development rather than additions.
Some connections between all of the events.
And I think that's the case, is like, develop the story and not just keep adding to the story.
And I think actually that's a really good point, is that they should make some connections between the games, because other than like, there are a few like light connections every here and there, but there should be sort of deep, heavy connections for the people that play through every game to be like, oh, okay, I know what that's referencing. I understand that the events of this game have now affected this world, and so on.
It would definitely be really interesting to see like the aftermath of your actions in Pokemon like Black and White, and then seeing how they translated over to X and Y, and how it affected this city or this island, and
then conversely how the events of X and Y will lead into Sun and Moon. Yeah, it'd be great if there was sort of a chronological timeline to like, the games.
Something like the Pokemon champion was from the city in the next game in the series, and because you beat him, he's gone into a state of like, oh, I can't beat anyone again, and you have to go on a quest to help him rejuvenate his previous glory.
Why not?
Something like that would be really cool, and it'd be a nice little touch to put in.
Alright, my last point on my list is, will there be any new 3DS exclusive content? Because the new 3DS, as annoyingly named as it is the system that Nintendo currently have as their flagship handheld. But the only difference from the original 3DS is that it's got slightly more processing power and like 3 exclusive games.
3?
I can honestly only think of 2, but I assume that there must be more than that, so I'm going to go with 3.
Okay. It's a good number.
So they didn't actually announce what console Sun and Moon would be running on, but there's a little copyright thing at the bottom that says 3DS, and then a load of like Japanese characters. So we can assume that it's going to be on the 3DS. But is it going to be new 3DS exclusive? Because if it was, like, I'd probably pick up a new 3DS. But they need to give us that information, and if it's not, they need to give us a reason to buy a new 3DS by saying, okay, well, if you have a new 3DS, Pokemon will run better, or it will like give you something additional that means that we have a reason to buy that console.
It would be really cool to like have something like that. Like, if you buy it with Pokemon already installed on the new 3DS, it comes with I know the Pokemon Yellow 20th Anniversary Edition.
Yeah, that would be really nice.
And you get 2 games, and you feel like, oh, okay, I'm getting this extra game, and getting more playtime out of my new 3DS.
Absolutely. Alright, well, in terms of new stuff that I'd like to see for Sun and Moon, that's actually everything on my list.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Alright, well, in that case, we'll move on to the second section, and I will write an article about this, but for the time being, I thought that I should speak about it on the podcast. because I've been looking into a lot of this Sun and Moon stuff, and whilst we know very, very little, if we look at past trends of what Pokemon has been doing, it seems like it could very easily be the case that Sun and Moon are actually quite directly connected with Gold and Silver, the Generation 2 games.
You mentioned this to me, and the idea of the article you were going to write, and it seems to make sense, because that's the way they're going. Pokemon X and Y, 6th generation, they kind of went back to the starters in first generation. So you got your first starter, and then you go through a few towns with the starter, and then you get to pick between a Charmander, Squirtle, and Bulbasaur.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was like, oh, okay. And you had a bunch of new, and you had these old Pokemon that you grew up with that you could now go and play with again. And like there was Mega Evolutions based around them. They were the first that I read about, actually.
Oh yeah, fair enough.
I think they were. So it seems to be going that way.
Yeah, it seems to be that with Generation 6 and X and Y, they really focused on a lot of the original like nostalgia that Red and Blue gave. For example, even the colouring of the X and the Y in the logos are red and blue.
Yeah.
The colours of the legendaries, Xerneas and Yveltal. Xerneas is mostly blue, Yveltal has red and black. They're clearly like sort of strongly tied to those colours. You're right, you get the Kanto starter Pokemon really early on, so you get to play through the whole game with two different Pokemon. At the time in the anime, they really pushed Kanto and a lot of that original stuff really hard. Like Misty reappeared and she hadn't been around for like 5 years. Brock was going around with Ash. It was a big time for Kanto. So moving on to Sun and Moon, you only have to look back at the fact that Gold and Silver look how they do, and you can see that the Sun and Moon logos that they released are actually really quite similar. The colour scheme seems to be the same. They seem to be of a similar style. And of course, when you think Gold and Silver, you think of like Lugia and Ho-Oh.
Ho-Oh, yes. We looked on Korokoro magazine, and we found that the palette choices for the fonts were that red and gold kind of colour was like, and then the blue and silver fitting in with Ho-Oh and Lugia.
Respectively. Exactly. Yeah. And of course, Gen 2 was the first game to introduce a day and night cycle.
It was,
So it's strongly already tied to the idea of there being a difference between night and day, and then Ho-Oh and Lugia themselves very much seem to represent the sun and the moon.
Yeah, from their kind of palette colour choices of Ho-Oh being red and gold and very sun inspired almost, and then Lugia being this giant white monster with like the blue tips to it. It just has that kind of lunar feel around the palette choice.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you look into some of the Pokédex entries, as obviously you did, you can see that Ho-Oh is the rainbow Pokemon. So like that's clearly tied with like the light of day and sunshine and
hitting off and reflecting on the rainbows. But then we looked at Lugia's, and in his Pokédex entry, it's got that he slumbers at the bottom of the sea or something around those lines. And then when he moves, he creates huge tidal waves, like the moon, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
The moon controls the tide.
That link in particular seems really interesting. The fact that like Lugia has power over the sea, just like the moon.
Yeah, it's an odd little detail that when you mentioned this, I looked up Pokédex entry, see if there was any tie in or direct tie-in, and that little like note, it might be nothing. It could just be totally nothing, but you never know. It could be adding to or alluding to something.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems to be that like even references like the Lu in Lugia could be a reference to Luna. And even the shiny versions of Ho-Oh and Lugia seem to, even though their colour palette switches, shiny Ho-Oh has like still like sort of red and gold. They just removed the green, so it looks even more sort of golden. Yeah. And then like the sun, even more sort of majestic. And then
Lugia's is still white, but the blue has been replaced with red.
Similar to maybe a blood moon or Lunar Eclipse.
Yeah, it might be a bit of a stretch.
Could be a stretch, that one.
But still something. And speaking of Pokemon, with second gen, Umbreon and Espeon were introduced in that generation. The Sun and Moon Pokemon that you had to evolve during night and day. Again, I think it was just part of the evolution gimmick of, look, we have night and day. You can evolve Pokemon during the day and night, and this is the only way you can do it.
That's true.
I think it was a gimmick for then, but them referencing it now, they could be referencing it now because of the titles, and it's like, oh, Espeon, Umbreon, Sun and Moon Pokemon, this all ties in.
One of the strongest ties to me actually seems to be by what's missing in the. So we mentioned a second ago about how X and Y gave you the Kanto starter Pokemon, and then you got Mega Evolutions of them later on. Well, with the Gen 3 remakes that we got a couple of years ago, they also gave us Mega Evolution versions of those starter Pokemon.
They did.
Conspicuously absent are the Generation 2 starters and their Mega Evolutions. Surely they'll get them, because I don't think that they just miss out a whole generation like that. But they were clearly not even referenced at all in any game as of yet. So that could definitely be something that they focus on with Sun and Moon, and that would be a direct tie to Gen 2, and it seems to be that things will be heading that way. It
would make sense for them to go chronologically. If they went to fourth gen starters and push those, that would be very strange for them to do.
That would seem really weird, yeah.
So them going chronologically makes sense.
Okay, well, I think that might be everything that we've thought about for Sun and Moon.
Another thing I was thinking about, actually, we talked a little bit about the huge post-game of Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby.
Yeah.
Do you think that fans will be expecting another big post-game, and that's part of the appeal of doing the Gold and Silver influence? Because Gold and Silver had a huge post-game in its original form, where you went back to Kanto and beat all the gym leaders and became the Pokemon champion there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because this was seemingly leaked as Project Rainbow about a month or two ago. Some idea specs of this came out, and it was called Rainbow at the time. And of course, Ho-Oh is the Rainbow Pokemon.
It does.
So what if that was referencing some post-game where you could, like the colours of a rainbow, go back through each different coloured generation of games, as it were, and explore, Sinnoh and Unova, and why not even Hoenn, Kanto, Johto?
Well, all the islands are based on Japanese islands, is that right?
No, not entirely.
Not entirely, but some of them are.
Yes.
Would it make sense that, like Latios or Latias, you go on Ho-Ho's back and fly around the different islands?
Yeah, that totally seems like it could be. Absolutely.
It would make sense. For or Lugia even.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be version specific. And we'll look to see what the differences between the versions are as well when they come out. Hopefully, in fact, that would be something that I should have thought about earlier that I've just thought about now. Maybe something actually a bit more different between the two versions, because generally the differences between the two versions are like 6 different types of Pokemon show up, and like you can trade them over and then you've got them all. Yeah. Like that's kind of been it. So maybe a more defined difference between the two games would be not unwelcome.
It would definitely be interesting. I'm not sure it would work potentially.
Okay.
I guess it's hard to. It's kind of. I mean, okay. Let's look at it this way. You've got. We're both PS4 owners. What if there was a game that we were really looking forward to, and it came out on PS4, but we found that the Xbox One version had 6 more hours of content, or a new item that can never be found on
it just changes the
PlayStation
game,
4. And you kind of feel cheated out of that, so you have to pick the one, like the item you want most, or whatever feature is on most on individual games, or you get both games.
Yeah.
So I don't think they'll do that. but I think
Yeah,
they'll
I
keep it the
suppose
way it
being
is.
forced to choose between which like version of a thing you want because it's got the most like different things maybe wouldn't be the best idea.
I mean, it's a hard choice anyway, trying to pick which one to go for.
Well, generally, and at least for me, I know it just comes down to which legendary I think looks the coolest.
Yeah,
because I know that. Yeah.
That's definitely the case. Because you can't really tell the differences until you pick up and play it. And it's like, oh, I can't get this Pokemon anyway. That kind of sucks.
Yeah.
But you find ways, and especially online trading and stuff, or when to trade, stuff like this, you can get those Pokemon.
That's true. It's
easier.
definitely not too hard to trade for any Pokemon in the game now.
So yeah, I think they'll keep it the same. It's kind of a staple now in Pokemon.
Fair enough.
And for them to drastically change something like that, I think it would be strange, and I think they'd get a lot of criticism over that.
Okay, well, that wraps up our thoughts on Sun and Moon. Hopefully they will live up to our expectations, and hopefully a few of these changes or ideas will be developed further within the game. I've been James Davies.
I've been Josh Timmiss.
And thank you very much for listening.